Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy you're all here this morning because we are going to be deep diving with deep sea vision. That sounds really cool. So we're all in for a treat this morning. I am Jackie Prejean. I am the treasurer of the Atchison Amelia Earhart Foundation. The foundation supports the Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum, and I'm also the Amelia Earhart Festival coordinator. So I'm equally glad that you're here for the festival and hope you'll enjoy some more of our festivities today. I'm sure some of you joined us yesterday for Adventure Amelia. Fascinating panel discussion with experts who searched and continue to search for Amelia, Fred Noonan, and the missing Electra 10E. This morning, the deep dive with Tony and Lloyd Romeo into their recent discovery and the sonar image they released that we think may be Amelia's airplane, finally, right? So a couple of things we need to do this morning. We want to thank the sponsors. I need to thank SkyWest Airlines, Blishmais, the Adair Foundation, Garmin, and Southwest Airlines for their support of these festivities. I also want to thank Benedictine College and their team for all their work to help make today possible. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. Hopefully you got a note card and a pencil so that if you think of a question that you would like to ask today, we'll ask you to write that out and someone will pick them up as we get closer to the finale of the program, and we will ask as many questions as we can. I'm also really pleased this morning to be able to introduce today's moderator for our deep dive. Amelia Rose Earhart holds her private, instrument, and commercial ratings as a pilot, and in 2014 became an around-the-world pilot, completing a complex, one-of-a-kind flight plan inspired by the American hero she was named after, Amelia Mary Earhart. Amelia partnered with Pilatus Aircraft to fly the Pilatus PC-NG single-engine airplane around an equatorial route inspired by the original flight attempt of Amelia Mary and Fred Noonan in 1937. Amelia Rose is a past Amelia Earhart Festival Pioneering Achievement Award recipient. From 2012 to 22, Amelia ran the Fly with Amelia Foundation, granting flight training scholarships to young women ages 16 to 18 across the United States. In 2023, the Fly with Amelia Foundation donated remaining funds to our Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum. To share a lesson learned during her journey around the world, Amelia recently published a book, Learn to Love the Turbulence, Flight Lessons on Becoming the Pilot in Command of Your Own Journey. I'm very honored to introduce a woman who's become a great friend, Amelia Rose Earhart.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie. That means a lot. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a moderator for such an exciting conversation here with Tony and Lloyd. And thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your Saturday to join us. We've got a riveting conversation planned. So to introduce my two guests here, we have Tony Romeo, CEO of Deep Sea Vision, and also his brother, Lloyd Romeo, project manager of Deep Sea Vision. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
I want to wish you both blue skies. So last night, you two were walking around the music and the concert, and you were with our beautiful reenactor, Amelia Earhart here. Sydney, say hello. And
She's
you
amazing.
both were really taken by the reaction of the crowd. Tell us what that was like for you both to see that happening here in Atchison.
Oh, she's amazing. It's striking how the resemblance between her and actually the part that she's really got down. If you haven't met her, you need to, because she's got this transatlantic accent down like you've never seen him before, and she's in character. So don't talk about World War II. Hasn't happened. She's amazing.
So, gentlemen, I thought we'd begin with the name Deep Sea Vision. There's obviously the literal interpretation of this name, but there's got to be a deeper vision. Vision meaning something we can see with our imagination, but we may not be able to see with our eyes. Tell us the meaning behind this name and what your organization really stands for as a whole.
Sure. Actually, when it came up to name the company, I called Lloyd, who is my confidant for everything, and I said, "What do you think we should name this?" And he immediately came up with Deep Sea Vision. So I credit him for actually having come up with it. But it was the idea that we're going to go as we're going to be the deepest explorers in the world, and we're going to have the Hugin 6000, which is the best deep sea sonar system available, and there's no better name than Deep Sea Vision. And there's actually only a couple, two or three non-gray, non-military commercial companies out there that can do what we can do, go as deep as we can go. So it's pretty amazing to have that equipment. When we bought this actually from Norway, it took phone calls to the embassy in Norway, the Pentagon, other folks to finally get it released from Norway, because they thought we were working for some middlemen for China or Ukraine or I don't know, something like that. And so it was a little bit of a process. Just it's not every day, I guess, that just a citizen just goes and buys a Hugin 6000. But it was, yeah. So that, I mean, that's the idea, is that there's this big backlog of work in deep ocean work and minerals and in cable laying projects, government work, and archaeological stuff. So this was a niche that we wanted to get right in the middle of.
Lloyd, what's it like to work as a brother team on a mission like this? This is like when we used to build forts as children, we'd play with our siblings and cousins. You guys are kind of taking that to an extreme here.
Yeah, this was, we'll talk about the magnet fishing that really started this whole thing later. But I've really enjoyed supporting Anthony on a lot of his projects. He's come up with a lot of visions and things, and then I was like, that sounds like a workable idea. And then I jump in and help out all I can, and it's really been a lot of fun. First you go, is that really possible? And then so I'm like, yeah, it is. I think he's got an idea here. And so we went for it, and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, Lloyd's great. Everyone's got that person. If you tell them an idea, I'm like, that's terrible. That's not gonna work. Like Lloyd's the guy in my life. I could tell him we're going to the moon tomorrow. I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's build it.
We all need a Lloyd, someone who cheers us on towards those big adventures and will actually go with us. That's wonderful.
Right.
Well, you both clearly have a lot of camaraderie, and you're seen as a team walking around. So as you find them throughout the day, come on up and say hello. They're very open to answering all sorts of questions. So before we get into the details of the search and that image that has riveted the entire world, let's talk about the roles that you both play as you're out there on the ship. We want to go through a typical day in the life, because I'm sure before you discovered that image, there was a lot of monotony, right? You're out there searching, you're doing the same thing every day. So start in the morning. Tell us how things go down.
Well, a lot of times it starts at 3 o'clock in the morning because that unit's down there, and it's cruising along, and it'll send a little bit of data at a certain point, and somebody has to make sure that our unit is still functioning. And so at 3 o'clock in the morning, a lot of times it was me looking at the computers and saying, yep, it's still where it's supposed to be, it's still doing what it's supposed to, and watch to keep on running. So a lot of times, yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. The unit would be down there at 36-hour cycles. So we would have to get up and get out there at 36-hour cycles, which of course doesn't divide into 24 very well. So we'd get out there, and we'd have to turn it around, bring it back on the ship, change out the batteries, get it all back, and then send it out again. The days weren't always divided up evenly into 24, but we did stick to a schedule of having breakfast in the morning, getting out there. So it was unusually irregular.
And it all starts with sort of a pre-flight, like in the piloting world, right? You kind of pre-flight your day. You have the captain that comes on board, gives a weather briefing, all of that. Tony, we were chatting about that beforehand. How strict is it on the ship?
It's you definitely have a hierarchy. So the captain's in charge of everything. He makes the final call. Then you have, the guys under him, and then separately you have the mission. And so, and then everyone sort of has their roles. I mean, I was expedition leader, but it wasn't like everybody, I think, it was very democratic in that sense. We all met every day to talk through the data that we just collected, mark off certain areas, talk about maybe a couple targets we'd seen, and then prepare for the next mission. You know what the hardest part of being on the boat was? Showers.
Oh, why is that?
Because you got to hold on and wash yourself at the same time. So yeah.
That's a really good point. I think we're working on getting the images up for the background here on the projector. Is that right, guys? Okay, thank you very much. So while we're getting those images pulled up, let's go back to that magnet fishing story you talked about, because I want to know, much like when I plan my flight around the world, it goes from idea for a really long time until it becomes reality. I want to know about that transition from this wild and crazy idea to do such a big thing to making it reality. How does that really truly come to life in a practical sense?
Yeah, so it was just a combination of a lot of different things all at one time. Midlife crisis, COVID, high interest rates, and but this lifelong fascination that Lloyd and I have shared with aviation, and then Amelia. Our dad, if you and you maybe heard us say it yesterday or read about, our dad flew for Pan Am for almost 50 years. He started it in 1941, just after actually, and so this was a story we heard a lot growing up. So that takes us to COVID 2020, and everybody's at home locked down. And I read this article in the Wall Street Journal about magnet fishing. I had never heard of this before. And my son, being whatever 4 or 5 years old at the time, I said, you know what? Let's go out and do this. So we bought it. If you haven't seen magnet fishing, is basically you tie a magnet, just literally a big chunk of metal magnet, to a rope, and you go and drop it in the water off a bridge or a pier or a dock, whatever, and you just kind of pull it along, and whatever sticks to it, you just kind of, it feels just like kind of fishing actually. Something kind of will cling to it, and you pull it up, and to a 5-year-old, a pair of scissors is like finding the Electra. And so we found all kinds of cool stuff, and actually some coins will stick to it. And we didn't find any of that, but we found some knives and a few, mostly all like trash. But it got us thinking about what else could you pull up from the ocean. And I live in Charleston. There's a lot of like Civil War stuff. There's a lot of like relics out there in the ocean. You're not really allowed to go do it if it's buried. But the next thing was like, well, what about this Electra? The biggest, in my mind, and I think everybody probably in here would agree, the biggest mystery and the biggest missing thing to this day. And I said, well, why don't we string this line of magnets a mile long and drop it and just kind of drag it along the ocean? So guess who I called?
There you go.
Lloyd's like, that's
Enter Lloyd.
Yeah, enter Lloyd. I'm like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to call you back in a minute on this one. This is a little bit wise, this is a little crazy, but anyways, the conversation progressed very quickly, and then it was, well, why can't we do this with AUVs or some of the advanced sonars that are out there? And then about that time, I was moving out of real estate because of high interest rates, and I was at home a lot. And my wife said, "Yeah, you need to get out of the house. You're in here too much now. I'm seeing you too much." And so I was like, "Well, what about this idea where this exploration company will turn it into a business?" And I have all the respect in the world for the Nauticos guys that are here. I think Rod and Tom. Our approach was a little bit different than theirs. Rather than do it as just an expedition and be done, and then have to go raise money for the next one, I decided to come at this as a business. If we put the money, we buy the capital, buy the AUV, and there's this big backlog of work in the Pacific, we can use that equipment to go search. The stated objective is to find Amelia. You guys heard it here, we will find Amelia. If it's not on this, if this isn't the plane, we will find it. It will be on another expedition. Maybe it's in conjunction with Nauticos on the next expedition, but we will find the plane. Thank you. Appreciate it. And so we decided that one of the biggest expenses was the AUV. So if we could eliminate that, which is about $25,000 a day. So if you can take that out of the equation, and now you're just paying for the vessel, and then between projects, we put it to work, which we just came off a big project in Australia, which paid for the whole last expedition and some of the next ones. So it's a different strategy. We looked at it a little bit different. I think Ted Waite had similar idea when he was out there. He bought 2 AUVs, and then after he immediately sold them. So I don't think he was really into. I'm not really sure what the plan was there, but our plan is very much turn it into a business, and the mineral stuff is starting to really explode in the Pacific right now, so we want to be in the middle of that too, helping do that in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way, but also move that industry forward, because it is something that, once you understand what they're doing, is tremendously huge for the planet.
All right, so you decide to bring this crazy plan to life. You're out there, out at sea, you're near Howland Island. Let's talk about why you chose the specific search area that you did. And let's bring up the right image here. I believe we have it up near Howland Island. Why don't you talk about the area and why you chose it?
Yep, sure. So there's a little bit to discuss here. The area, stand up, this stuff right here is kind of what's been published out there. Ted Waite, who went out in 2009, he covered kind of this stuff right here. And then if you go up, the kind of stuff that's a little bit slanted, that's a lot of that is the Nauticos guys, Nauticos stuff. They did 3 expeditions. And then that green circle, everybody know Elgin Long. If you know Elgin Long, raise your hand if you heard that name. He published the book Mystery Solved. That was kind of his area of uncertainty. That he always felt like the plane probably went down. So this is sort of what we started with, and there may have been other searches that just haven't been disclosed, so we weren't really sure about that. But you see Baker, which was 37 miles to the south. There's Howland Island. That's what she was trying to fly to. There's a lot of very interesting things, easy things about the flight, because she was basically flying exactly along the equator. That it's just a straight from there to here, and so what happens is we start with, she makes 6 radio, you want me to go into this? Yeah, she makes 6 radio calls. Each one is important, but successively more important. She makes a call, we're 200 miles away. Interesting radio call, because we at this point, we get a radio signal strength of S3. Is S3 or S2 on the 200? It's S2, right? S3, okay, yeah, I was gonna make sure I get that right, okay. And then 30 minutes later, she calls and she says, we're 100 miles away. Now, there's something very interesting that happens here between those 2 radio calls. It only takes 30 minutes between those 2 calls, okay? But she flies 100 miles. You'll immediately notice that the speed at which she was flying, she could not have covered 100 miles. So there's something there. And we believe that something there could have been impacted by the fact that she flew over the international date line and the sun came up, and the sun became their primary means of navigation. They were using the sun line to basically figure out where they were. Then she says, we're here, but cannot see you, flying at 1,000 feet and low on gas. Probably said a half-hour gas. Some folks said a half-hour gas. Some people said low on gas. I don't think she'd say a half hour. People would write down a half-hour gas if she didn't actually say it. It's a very specific thing. But on number 4 there, she's saying, we've arrived. We're here. We're where we think the island should be, and we don't see. Imagine that feeling. Nothing. I mean, you flew into Howland, man. Imagine not seeing anything from, I mean, that's what it was for most of the flight, right? Nothing in all directions.
It almost messes with your mind how far and vast and wide the ocean is. It just goes forever. So thinking about finding anything when you can't see a spot of land in sight,
yeah.
I can imagine she was feeling desperation, her and Fred.
Yep, absolutely. Like, it must have been one of the most sickening feelings ever. And so she comes to the end of her landfall procedure. I'm not going to go into what all that means, but she flies probably a procedure that would have drawn a line across the line, because the worst thing you want is you fly into the island and then you arrive and you don't see it. Now you've got a decision, right? Do I go north or do I go south, right? You've got to pick one direction. And so the way to confront that is we offset. We fly way north. Did you offset when you flew? You just flew straight. Yeah, GPS. You cheater.
GPS. Yeah, I cheated.
So she offsets. She flies like this. So the island's right here. She flies up here and then flies a line right through the island. What that does is it ensures that even if we're far enough north that we're at least going to hit the island, right? We're far enough north that we're not going to. And if we miss Howland, there's Baker, which is a kind of our fail-safe. So the angle north, hit the line, and then come down to make sure at least we hit the island. Well, she flies that landfall, we believe, and then she says, we're here, we're on you, but we can't see you. And then she says, we're circling. So she's flown the end of her landfall procedure, and she says, we're circling, which is probably what anybody would do. Now, hey, Fred, we messed up. Probably said that a little differently, but we messed up. I don't see anything. What do we do? And say, okay, let's circle for a minute. Let's try to get our radios working. Let's figure out if we can contact this ship. Up until that point, they couldn't get two-way radio communication with the ship. And so the problem was, for them, was that now they're not getting any information that they needed from the boat. Wind information, namely, was probably the big one. And obviously navigational direction information. And so they circle. They continue to try to get their radios to work. And then that takes us to the next one. Where she says, we can hear you, very important call here, we can hear you, but you're more, but cannot, we can hear you, but cannot see you still. But what she's saying is, repeat it on voice, is what she says. I don't have that up here, but it says repeat with voice. So what she's telling us is she's hearing the Morse code. They were tapping out Morse code to her because they were realizing they can't hear each other with the voice communication. The boat is hearing her, she's just not hearing them. But did Amelia know Morse code? Did she know Morse code? She didn't. Why didn't you learn Morse code? Too busy. Selling suitcases. She was, yeah, for whatever reason, it's like one of the mysteries to me of why she did not know Morse code, and it's unfortunate she, that was the time to have learned it. But she was a pioneer of radio communications. She was one of the first ones to be using this out there. But they're tapping out Morse code to her, and she doesn't get it. Fred also doesn't know Morse code. And so the next thing, she says, okay, so sorry, before I go on from here. When she says that, one thing that Nauticos has done, which I think is brilliant, is they've gone and recreated the radio signals for that point in time, because there is a distance from which that airplane would have heard the Itasca's Morse code signals. There's a limit to how far you can hear Morse code, and they've actually figured out what that distance is, which is incredible. And based on some of that, and based on the number, the S5 that the radio operator wrote down, we have kind of a good idea where she was at that point. And it also tells us something that's also very important. She's hearing Morse code very loudly. The boat is hearing her very loudly. She knows she's close, just like the boat knows she's close. Everybody ran up on deck on the boat looking for her. They were looking around, and then she's coming in. We hear her very loudly. And then suddenly, there's nothing. We don't see her anywhere. She's having the same experience in the plane. It's really loud. She's having that exact same experience. I hear you. I know I'm close. She wants to stay anchored to that place. She doesn't want to fly off 400 miles to another island. I wouldn't think. But she knows she's close. 45 minutes later, we hear her final call. It says, we're on the line, 157337. To us, that's the most important one, because that's the last time we hear from her. Every bit of information until the end becomes, as I said, more and more important. That's the last time she gives us any location information, and so based on that, we kind of started building our search pattern. And to kind of go back to that previous slide, so 157 is that red line. That's what she's telling us. She's referencing the line of Howland Island. Presumably, she doesn't say that, but presumably she's going through Baker and Howland Island, and she's flying up and down on that. And that she's basically telling us, we're about to go down. She's screaming. She's hysterical. She's crying. She's described as crying on the microphone. And they say, and she's telling us this, she's basically giving us the only reference that she can say is, we're probably going down. Come find us. And this is where we're going to be. In the Itasca, basically went, they waited an hour. It's unfortunate they waited as long as they did, but they decided to go north first and kind of follow that line north. And of course, they never found anything. So,
wow, so all that information leads to this very specific search area. Tell us the dimensions of the area that you were searching.
Well, we ended up searching 5,200 square miles. So it was a lot of empty ocean out there.
Wow. And you're watching the visuals on screen. Tell us about that moment when you go from seeing nothing to seeing something that looks distinctly like the shape of an airplane. What's that emotion like? What did the crew reaction feel like? Take us into the ship at that moment.
Yeah, well, a lot of that happened. Okay, well, to start off and back up a bit, every 36 hours, like I was saying, actually 38 hours, we'd bring the unit back up, and then we'd spend about 4 hours going through all the data that the AUV had picked up. And so it has a lot of, it's like an ultrasound of the bottom of the ocean. And you see everything there. You see planes, you see old dormant volcanoes. I think we discovered some volcanoes that nobody's ever seen before, probably been sitting there for millions of years. So it's interesting, and sometimes it's really boring, to be honest. There's just nothing. It's like looking down on the Sahara Desert from above. So we're looking at all this terrain, and like I said, if it's busy, you may spend 5 hours looking over it. If it's not so busy, it's maybe only a couple hours. Now, the actual sighting was kind of not what we expected. Okay. We had pretty much given up. We were at the end of our 80 some odd days of being out there, and we were headed back. And we pretty much felt we hadn't found anything. Well, we'd added a lot of empty, clear ocean. We could say, yep, it's not these areas, but that wasn't very satisfying. So we were a little frustrated, and we were out of time, resources, fuel, and we had some other work we had to do elsewhere. So we were on the way back, and one of the engineers, one of the ones that's better than me, came along and he says, I think he grabbed you first, and maybe you should tell that
Yeah,
story.
no, that's right. That's right. Yeah, he came down and said, "Hey, you guys got to take a look at this." And at first we thought something was wrong. We were on the galley. The operations center was up on the bridge area near where the captain sat. And so we all went upstairs, and it's called a sonar waterfall. Basically, it's just you see the sonar images coming down the screen, and he hits play, and then so I think one of the things you were going to ask about, I'll mention now, is that how sandy. It's just flat and sandy out there. Some areas there's more terrain, but where this was, it was just totally flat and sandy, and it just it's just brown, right? Just sand, and then all of a sudden, boom, and it's unmistakable that there's something protruding up above. So the first thing you always notice is it man-made, right? You've got clear lines, whatever, and then man-made lines, and then features, and then the second thing, your eyes are just trained to look for certain things of the right dimension. Yeah. It's the last slide. Let's see. There it is. Yep. So yeah, we immediately the things that we liked about it were the thing I liked the most about it is the tail. Now I think folks when they see sonar, it is, you have to have a lot of experience looking at this stuff. So it's not you're not going to see, for example, numbers on the plane, right? You're not going to see the NR. Actually, somebody sent us an email and said, "Hey, I think you guys really found her. We see the NR 16020 on it." And I was like, yeah, sonar's
We
not
see what we want to see, right?
It's awesome. That's great. But yeah, and this was caught by I think around 600 feet away. So if you can imagine this sitting here, and you've got the sonar like way over here at 50 meters, so you're not going to get a perfect image of anything, right? You're painting the target with sound essentially, and it's like a flashlight. And the beam of the flashlight is wider at the end than it is at the base of the flashlight. So as you get further and further away, things get distorted and stretched, particularly as you're going along. And we were running the sonar as fast as we could go. We basically calibrated the system to go as fast as we could, cover as much ground as for us, it was 100% a math problem. This was an exercise in probability and statistics. And I mean, we had every minute down. I mean, we wanted this to be the most efficient. We wanted to be out there, the fewest people possible on the boat, the fastest we could run the AUV. I mean, everything was just, it was a business, right? Again, back to my point, I was running this as a business, and the most area that we could cover, the most equal probability area, the fastest possible. Anyways, so we're running through targets. We're not going to expect to see great looking anything, but we expect to see a flash of metal and of the target, and that's what we got here. And so the tail, we see kind of an outline of the tail. There's been criticism of the swept wings. I will 100% agree with that. The swept wings doesn't bother me as much, because if you actually straighten out the tail, you straighten out the wing kind of together, you end up with an aircraft that looks a little bit more like this.
And Tony, let me interrupt you, because yesterday I asked you that exact question. I said, what about the swept wing argument and controversy? But you were telling me the distortion looking through water and at those depths, you're not going to get a perfectly clear shape of anything. So explain what you told me yesterday about that concept.
Sure. So you're going to, as you're looking at the sonar, it's going to stretch more in this direction than straight on. The sonar is coming back straight like this, straight at me, like directly at us. But in the up and down direction, it's going to stretch, because I'm not describing it as well as a sonar guy would, but the stretch, as a flashlight beam goes out, it gets wider and wider. And you're actually looking at the same, so up close to the sonar, you're only looking at it for maybe, I'm just making up numbers here, like 1/10 of a second. But out here, you're looking at it at maybe 2/10 of a second, because the beam is wider, and so you're seeing it longer. So what happens is you're naturally going to get targets that look just a little bit bigger, a little bit more magnified. And the further you get away from the sonar and the sound, the more it gets distorted, and it's not going to look as accurate as the actual target. We knew this. We knew this. We were actually looking out 800 meters on both sides. So imagine that, a full mile between the sonar and both sides of the target. We knew that the stuff at the edge of those targets were not going to be great. We knew that. And we were fine with that because so long as we were in a very sandy area and we got a flash of something, anything, we knew we were looking at something promising. And then the second filter was the dimensions, and I put the dimensions up there. I think everybody's familiar with that. So, yeah, no, that's why we felt great. And we're open to the skepticism. I'm not, gonna ever. I read someplace like 40% is a good number because if you're wrong, that's like I said 40%, but if you're right, you look like a genius, right? Because it's not 50. But place your bets. That's what I feel like. Place your bets. We'll find out soon enough. So.
Should we place our bets in the room right now? Raise your hand if you think this is Amelia's plane. All right. Hey, those are pretty good odds, guys.
Rod, come on, Rod.
Good. Come on. Let's get him on record. I love it. I love it. So zoom us out from this image right here. What would we see around the shape of what looks like an airplane? Would we see darkness all around like we're seeing in the corners?
Shoot. No, I don't have, we cut a lot. Well, this is good
Or
slide,
if you could just visually or sort of describe what it would look like if you were to have a wider swatch.
Yeah, no, this is actually, I like this slide. This is near Howland Island. So that's Howland right there. I think Baker up there, get oriented here. But so as you're coming up to the island, as you're coming to the foot of this is just one area that we searched, and this was not where we found the target. But as you come closer to the island, searching becomes very difficult because you're sorting through thousands of targets that could be the right size. And we always said, and I think Tom and they'll agree as well, if she's within 6 miles of the island, if she's on that, because it is a steep ascent to Howland, because Howland Island is a volcano, comes all the way to the surface, 3 miles up, just like Pikes Peak, is nearly the same as Pikes. You're not. I think it'll be very difficult. It'll be a long time until we find her if she's that close. However, out here, as you get further and further away from the foothills, let's call it the foothills of Howland, this area is just nothing. There's just nothing out here.
So just sand.
It's just sandy bottom, yeah.
Wow. So that image really stood out.
It did. Yeah. Let me point out that, okay, so that's Howland Island, like Anthony said, is the top of a volcano. Up there to the north and a little bit to the west is another volcano. And just a seamount, though, it doesn't break the surface of the ocean. So another, I don't know, we should give it a name, I think, maybe the Amelia Seamount or something. But it's there, and there's a lot of topography there that's very interesting. And I think the volcanoes we saw were over there to the right. And anyway, it's maybe. Anyway, they were up there. It was very interesting to see all this stuff that, nobody's ever experienced before.
So take us into the ship. You're watching the sonar waterfalls, you called it. The image pops up. Does everybody run in to look at it? Are there high fives? Like, what's the reaction here? And be honest.
It was a surreal moment. Yeah, there was some things said, probably, but we're making a documentary on it. There was obviously a lot of excitement, but there was also this kind of regret that we didn't find this earlier. This was found, as Lloyd mentioned, earlier in the mission, quite a bit earlier. So to know that we had this the whole time was frustrating, but it was exciting. A lot of decisions had to be made. We immediately shut down Starlink. We didn't want anybody texting pictures out to family or anything. But then we started realizing, well, nobody's going to know where this is at. This is, we were actually almost to American Samoa. We were getting ready to do a search for another plane, and so well, let's put this out. Let's get folks excited about this. And we're making a documentary. It's called Why Not Us, which will conclude hopefully with this next expedition and whatever announcement that we have to make. But it was we had a bottle of 1937 whiskey with us out there. Did I tell you about this? Yeah. And so our lead guy, Craig Wallace, the #1 sonar guy in the world, he built the Hugin, by the way. So it's the little side story. When I bought the sonar system, I flew out to Norway to train on it. They gave us a 3-week training course, and while we're there, one of the instructors said, hey, this thing can go wider. You can search wider with this thing. The guy that Craig Wallace is the guy, he's designed and built this thing. He's Scottish. You're going to have to get his permission. I said, all right, well, I was like, I got to talk to this guy. So where better than meet a Scottish guy, but at the bar there in Norway. And it was what we did. And so we had 2 or 3 beers, and basically the next day he had quit Kongsberg and jumped on to be the president of operations. So and he'd been there almost 20 years, and and there's a little bit more to the story, but I told him we wanted to go find Amelia. I promised him we're going to find Amelia, and he had stood on the runway in Leh where she took off from. His uncle had died there many years ago, and it was for him a very special story and something he's always wanted to do. I said, we're going to find her, and come join us, my brother and I, and let's do this. And he did, and he believed it. And he's been the best. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes in this thing, but he was not one of them. He was absolutely fantastic. But he stretched this thing from 400 meters to 800 meters. And I mean, he's the reason why we were successful. But that's I'm not sure where I was going with that, but that was
no. It
it
takes a great team to pull incredibly complex missions off like this. So it shows that when you bring more minds together, it's more information. Which is learning yesterday during the panel discussion. That's what you guys really seem to stand for, is incorporating information together to really combine information to see what you can find. So before we go on to what's next for you all, why don't you show us some of the equipment that you were using on the ship? I know you've got some slides here. I know the kids in the room will especially love to see this, but tell us sort of the simple version of how this stuff works and what you've got on board.
Sure, yeah. As quickly as possible here, because we could talk a couple hours just on this stuff. This is Craig, John, and I think Lloyd in there. They're swapping out the batteries, so it would go down for about. What's that?
I said that's my nose.
Yeah, it is your nose. Yeah, yeah. And it's like 100 degrees in this thing. We're in these. They were called boiler suits. We're sweaty as hell, and everyone smells great. And these batteries are about 100 pounds, 300 pounds. Yeah, total. Yeah, each 300, about 120 kilograms, and they come up. You swap them out. You do a hot swap. This was another part of the strategy. We didn't want to. You could charge them on the deck, but we wanted extra ones, so we'd swap them out. And we had it 3 hours, guys. We were from bottom to bottom 3 hours. So that had to come all the way up, swap the batteries, change the oil basically, and then send it back down 3 hours. And just absolutely incredible. The NASCAR, these guys right here, how quickly they changed it. Changed out the batteries and then send it back down. And because it was a new system, we didn't have any issues. It's very robust. And I don't know why it's not playing, but that's fine. And then this is a recovery here. I can't hit play. Got from control center up there, but it's okay. It's I can talk through it if not.
So guys, we've only got about 5 more minutes here, and I've got some more questions before we open it up to our audience questions. And again, if you have more specific questions, let's watch this video here real quick. I know it's a short one.
Yeah, but I think this is it going out, or is it coming in? There's our dock crew out there getting some footage. But anyways, it just slides off this rail. It's not tethered to the ship. Nothing connected to the ship. Goes all the way to the bottom of the ocean, does a steep dive, and just goes all the way to the bottom. We're not getting any live feed from it when it's at the bottom. Okay, we get that question all the time. There's no live feed. It's just down there, just running for. So if you screw something up, and we had one mission, our first mission, we forgot to turn on the sonar. So I don't even like admitting that.
Oh, yeah, that was a short mission.
Yeah, very first dive, and I always the moment where I was like, I don't know, this is not going well, and it comes up and there's nothing. I'm like, holy shit, we screwed up, and so.
Oh, I love it. So this next question I would like to ask on behalf of Amelia, Mary Earhart, and all the other ladies in the room. You had a 16-person team.
Uh-oh. I think I know where this is going.
16.
Why were there no women on your team? And the second part, are you taking applications? And the third, where can I apply?
So,
oh, sure, you give it to Lloyd. Yeah.
yeah, dump it on Lloyd. Okay, so let me point out that 8 of those team members were along with the ship. Okay, the ship came from Papua New Guinea, and we leased the ship. It wasn't ours. So the captain, the co-captain, um, the guys that made everything work. Those were all mostly from Papua New Guinea, a couple of them from Australia. So we took what we got there. Okay. But it was a very diverse crew in some respects. So, so then we had the 7 team members of 7 or 8, I guess it'd be 8. Now, one of them was a Kongsberg engineer that wanted to come along as a consultant, and I guess they knew Kongsberg knew that we were going to be pushing things not past the spec, but right up to them, just right up. So they sent a consultant along, and that was Harold, and I had the pleasure of sharing a cabin with him at the top bunk. Then the rest of us were friends of Anthony's, so I'm going to stick it back on Anthony here.
I think we stumped him, guys. What do you think? No, and I say this jokingly. You had the right team for the right mission, and I respect everything you're doing. But I do have to ask, because we want to work in that direction, right? We want equality in all areas, but this is your personal mission, so I understand.
Yeah, there
so
wasn't
I
too many female sonar engineers.
Yes,
We hope they will be soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's a reasonable thing. And any of you girls want to go into sonar, I mean, I think it's a promising career move because inner space, as they used to call it, is certainly a moving field. And as somebody told me once, everything under the ocean will eventually be found, and so there's a lot there. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of intrigue. And frankly, there's a lot of money to be made down there eventually.
I think just a real quick answer is the marine industry is dominated by men. It's just that's just the way it is. It's mostly men. I think there's something romantic about the idea of 16 men out there searching for Amelia, and that that's the part that I really liked about the story. So
your wife thought that was safe.
We'll talk about that later. So let's wrap it up. Tell us what's next. I know you're not telling exactly when or where you're going back because those pieces of information need to remain secret, but tell us generally the plan so that we can all hang on your every last word.
Well, we do plan to go out there. We need confirmation. Really, we have a very interesting target, a very promising target. But until we get a camera down there and we see NR 16020 on the wing, we don't really know. And the thing about those sonar, as Anthony was saying, is you don't get any color information off of it. So that's all just pings from sound waves. So getting a camera down there, which that's a feat. Getting a camera down 5,000 meters, and you have to have something to handle that kind of pressure, and you have to light it up with a laser to to get a realistic picture. We really want to document this thing and see what's around it. I think that really needs to be done. People will ask us what kind of debris is around it. Certainly, I want to see Noonan's pencil. That's a big one. So we want to go back in the worst way and
then really, if best case scenario, you identified that it is Amelia and Fred, what happens with the aircraft?
Yeah, I think it goes in the Smithsonian. I think it's a national treasure. It's an American treasure. We want an American company to find it. We don't want a foreign company to get possession of this. There's the whole legal side of things. We could talk for hours about that. Who owns it, and what jurisdiction is it in? It gets kind of complex based on where you find it. It belongs on an exhibit. One of the stops will probably be here. I'm sure it will be. Purdue is important to her. Eventually the Smithsonian.
Well, I'm cheering you guys on, and I'm so honored to be able to moderate this panel and discuss with you both. I'm so proud of what you're doing as a part of the Amelia fan club, as we all are here in Atchison and beyond. I just want to say thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's open it up to some audience questions. Jackie has the mic. You'll be better from the podium anyways.
All right. Well, oh, this one's on. Okay. All right. The person up there wasn't there when I looked up there. Okay. So I have a few questions. And the first, I have two that are almost identical. So we want to know, how deep is the water where you
16,000.
found it?
16,000 feet.
That's deep. What is the most interesting thing you found outside of the airplane?
A beer can. Seriously. Yeah. I should have left it in. It was a picture of it, but yeah, it was kind of sad to see. I was disappointed to see that, but yeah, full Coors Light, by the way.
I was going to ask the brand. Okay, well, that's awesome. Coors people would like that, I'm sure. All right. If they had initially flown their original route to Howland from Hawaii and going the other direction, do you think the entire flight would have succeeded?
Wow, what a good question. Who asked that? That's a good question.
Who gave us?
That's a great question. Because I've often asked the same. If they'd went the other way, yeah, what would have happened? You know, the guy in this room to answer that question is sitting right there, Gary LaPook. He's done a lot of the slush, and we talked to him a lot before we went out. I don't know. Maybe I'll let him answer. I don't know what they expected to arrive at dawn, and with the headwinds, right? I mean, go ahead. That's right. That's right. Yep. That's right. And that's a great, because remember they had four people. There was four people on board when they took off from Hawaii, right? Or three. Harry Manning and Paul Mance had gotten off. Yeah, that's right. So they would have had a radio operator who bounced off when they switched around. But good question.
Yeah, so to repeat, for if you all couldn't hear, since Gary doesn't have a mic, you want to kind of,
What Gary said?
yeah.
Yeah, Gary
repeat what
said so.
said.
She would have found the island because they had a radio operator on board. What she needed on that plane was a third person. And one of the most fascinating things to me in the whole thing, maybe we get a chance for a minute to talk about it, is what was happening in those final minutes of the flight. How was Amelia managing? I mean, being up in the cockpit, you had one person with you, but when she was managing, she was looking out the cockpit, she's flying the plane, she's managing a radio, she's looking at the charts, she's trying to figure out why her radios aren't working, she's trying to spot that island, she's trying to argue with Fred about what to do, or maybe they're not, and then the engines are so loud they can't even talk to each other. She's having to write notes down. She's looking at her instruments. One of them says empty, right? The most important one. And so she's managing all of this as she's flying, and it just was too much. In a crisis, and for most of the flight, she handled it fine. But when things really got bad right at the end, she needed that third person, and she didn't have him.
When you're trying to maintain altitude, airspeed, heading, if you look down for a second, you can drop a couple hundred feet in an aircraft. So imagine with all that going on, the stress levels would be so high.
Right. I just wanted to add one thing also. I agree with Mr. LaPook there. I had reasons that weren't as good as his, but I'd also point out that she would have been fresher. From Malay, New Guinea, it's 2,550 miles approximately. So she had had a long day. After a long flight, she would have been fresher and more on top of her game if she'd gone the other way. So,
Oh, it was shorter, yeah.
that's right. It would have been a shorter trip and to find that little speck in the middle of the ocean.
All right, great. Next question. When do you think you're going back?
Late this year, early 2025.
All right. Okay. Excuse me. You've kind of talked about this, but if it's confirmed to be Amelia's plane, is there opportunity to recover the plane, or would it be too damaged and corroded?
100% want to pull it up. We believe she's a fallen soldier, needs to be brought home. That's the way we see this. The answer, and there's going to be part of this that will be salvageable, but it'll depend on the condition, and that is yet to be seen.
Okay, and I think you spoke to this too just a little bit, but if the plane's found and recovered, what will be done with it? The Smithsonian, we've talked about that, but who will own it? And that's kind of an interesting question.
And a legal one.
Well, Tony's a lawyer, right?
Indeed. The only one in the family.
Right. Please discuss plane metal composition and how it would have a unique signature.
How the plane would have a unique signature from the sonar? Is that the?
I guess so.
Yeah, I think I mean, you're looking for big, if it's sandy bottom, you're not getting a return. You're just seeing nice, flat, sandy brown return. But if it's rock or if it's metal, you're getting a shiny, bright return. So, engines, you want to see a nice return from. You want to see any shapes that are flat like this up. So, for example, like that horizontal. The two horizontal vertical stabilizers in the back, that should give you a small return because the sound is going to bounce off that. If the plane is, for some reason, when planes go to the seafloor, they always land right side up, and that's partially because as the planes, they actually fly through the water aerodynamically, like just as they would in the air, and they land right side up. Very seldom you'll see one upside down, but they land right side up. So depending on how it's sitting there, how the sonar is hitting it, you may see one engine, you may see if the wings kind of folded down. Folks have suggested because of the swept wings, which it's because of the impact of the water. I don't think that's the case, or the pressure of the water because it's so deep. Remember, once this thing gets 100 feet underwater, all the air is out of it. It's leaked out through the cockpit doors. I mean, so everything's equalized. So that you could go down 1,500 miles. It doesn't make any difference. The pressure's all gone. It's the water inside the plane is pushing just as much as the water outside the plane. So the pressure isn't really making a difference in terms of the the compactness or what the plane looks like. But yeah, you're just looking for any kind of man-made shapes. Circles are good ones if you're looking for engines, or lines. Straight lines would indicate wings. We were really looking for a cross, would indicate the wings and the fuselage.
And one thing real quick, I asked yesterday if there would be sand or silt on top of the plane that had built up over time, but at those depths, that wouldn't happen.
1 millimeter per 1,000 years. So,
Wow.
1 millimeter, that's the accumulation of silt and dirt and debris. Because when carcasses, fish die and things just land in the ocean, I mean, it's 3 miles to the bottom. Nothing, everything just dissolves and just breaks up. By the time it gets all the way to the bottom, it's virtually nothing. So you'll see these planes that came off the Lexington World War II planes, and they look just like they did. I mean, you can see all the painting and the pictures they had on the side of the planes. It's incredible. So yeah, I think the plane will be in. Also, there's just no free oxygen. There's no friction from water. It's just very stable. There's no light. It's 32.2 degrees, just above freezing. So you couldn't have a more ideal preservation environment.
Very interesting. Okay. In general, what did your expedition cost? In general.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. So I think it was about in the order of $2 million for the actual expedition is what we've published. And then the AUV was, I think, 7 or 8 million, something in that ballpark. So I mean, that was a capital, again, that was for the business, and everything that we did. We were out there for about 100 days. I think the cost per day was about, and that's really what you're looking at, because if you keep your cost per day down, we were under, I think, 15,000 a day, which I hate comparing to the Nauticos guys or anybody else, but I think that's the lowest it's ever. I mean, that I really prided ourselves on that. We brought fewer people. I fed the guys less food. No, that's not good. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, tell
Ate
everybody
good.
what you were eating every day. That's a popular question.
I'm sorry.
Tell them what you were eating every day.
Well, it was a lot of curry.
A lot of curry. Leftover foods turned into curry. Everything turned into curry.
Yeah, the crew was from Papua New Guinea, as I mentioned, and I guess they must eat a lot of curry over there and salt. In fact, the cook was making everything so salty, I had to steal his salt. I went in there and grabbed all the salt shakers, big salt shaker, and hit them. And then the next morning, the food wasn't so salty. So But yeah, we ate good. We had a lot of rice, a lot of curry, chicken, lamb. Not big on lamb, but yeah, we ate good.
All right. All right, here's a good one. The argument that this may be a Japanese official pre-war plane. If it is, why would it be out there near Howland? And do you believe the Japanese were trailing her?
Well, so just generally speaking about other theories, this is a scavenger hunt, right? I mean, in some ways, and I like it when the other guys are looking in the wrong spot. I just do. Except for the Nauticus guys, we're all looking in the right spot. But the other guys, hey, go get it. You're on the right track. Go find it. It's on that island. It's there. So yeah, I mean the some of the ridiculous, a jar of freckle cream, really. Is that? But no, I encourage them to go look in the wrong spots. The POW stuff, yeah, have at it. I'm not a big believer in as an attorney. Like oral history to me is hearsay. All the stories from the Marshall Islands are hearsay. There's never a direct plane was buried or shot down or she carved her initial. It's fun. It's added to the lore of Amelia Earhart. I think it's fun, and like I don't think she would mind it. Where I take offense is where there are suggestions that she wasn't a good pilot and would have flown 400 miles in the wrong direction. Would you have done that and you knew Baker was close and you knew there's no way she would have, or Fred would have made a decision like that. So that's why I take objection is when she's described as a mediocre pilot. She's not a good pilot. She wasn't. She was a great pilot. And she did stuff in 1937 that a lot of people, except this one on stage, wouldn't do today. And she was in a single engine plane, by the way. I don't know if you guys knew that. Single engine plane around the world. That's incredible. I mean, we took a single engine plane. Lloyd and I flew across from Florida to the Bahamas, and we had like 6 rafts, and we were, like,
and sometimes that ocean looked even bigger then.
Yeah.
What is it going to take to verify that it's her plane?
Pictures. Yeah, we got to have pictures. Yeah, we got to send a camera down there and see those numbers right there.
Okay, we've got just a couple minutes. If you've got another question or two, and then we'll wrap it up.
Should we end with a saucy one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right.
So we were chatting beforehand. I said, Tony, is there anything off limits? And he said, well, there is a theory that maybe Amelia was with child when she disappeared. Dive into that a bit, because I haven't heard much about this.
Has anybody heard this before?
Mm-mm.
No. Right? Yeah, I don't know what the other kind of the authors that have written about this. My theory is based on The Last Flight. So The Last Flight was printed posthumously. It was her accounts at each stop she made along the way: North America, South America, Africa, India, ultimately Darwin and Ley. She was publishing articles she was writing, and she was sending them back to GP, and he would publish them in the newspaper. And it was, at the time, it was like big news. Every stop, and she'd send back some pictures. And there's just some very interesting things that she mentions in the book. She arrives in Africa, and she says, Africa is all smells. And right, I mean, anybody that's been pregnant, would know, knows that, like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, what I mean, but like as a woman, like that's another thing. My wife, remember, she very, it's the smells, you become very, and she mentions it 2 or 3 more times at the stops, like the smells, and then she mentions, I think it was in India, and one of the mornings she got sick. And she blamed it on the fumes of the aircraft. And I'm like, I mean, you've been flying all this time, you've been flying your whole life, and suddenly you're getting sick from the fumes. So that was a little bit like that's a little bit kind of unusual considering how much she's been flying. I think she was sick twice. And then you also kind of see this bond between her and, in my mind, between her and GP. Some of the messages, telegrams are sent back and forth. It just seems like a little bit tighter bond there, and that she's, and in our final entry, her final fax. Wasn't a fax, text message. Wasn't a text. Telegram, let's call it telegram. Back home was, this was it for her, right? As this was her final flight. Yeah,
it does sound like she was ready to start another chapter in her life. Yeah.
Having said that, she was a big proponent of birth control and early, feminist adoption of feminist principles and conquering, breaking the glass ceiling and really pioneering female roles. And so I don't know. I don't think she ever really was adamant about having children, and I'm not saying that she was by any means. It just, there were some clues in the final flight that seemed to indicate that the next chapter of her life was coming. And yeah, I mean, we'll never know, obviously, but and maybe maybe she didn't even know. But the fact that she was sick, she had this really elevated sense of smell was interesting.
One last final question. Tell us now, after being in Atchison for a few days, and I know you were here in 2022 for the festival, but now that you spent time in this community, I know I keep coming back year after year. Jackie, you're stuck with me forever. I will always come back. Tell us what Atchison means to you now that you're developing this closer connection to Amelia and now a relationship with all these wonderful people in the community.
I've really been, honored to be here. I've never been to Atchison before, so I arrived and, as soon as I got to the airport, I was like, wow, this is really neat. It's, you have a really nice new airport. I noticed that right away, and, got through there real quick. Everybody was real friendly. Everybody was moving efficiently and very courteous there, which is not always the case in the pickup area, the passenger terminal. So we got through there really quickly, and the place has been very accommodating. Everything's moved efficiently, and I really want to thank the museum staff for taking care of us so well. And it's been a great experience, and I definitely want to come back again.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Mindy, Vanessa, Maggie. Great job. These guys are unbelievable. This thing was so well organized, and we've been treated super well. So thank you to the museum. The museum is unbelievable. You guys did a fantastic job. When I came here, it wasn't done, so it looks fantastic. We're excited about hopefully coming back next year with some news. I want to say that we're proud of what we've done, but we're building this on top of what a lot of other people have done before us. So, the Nauticos guys, I give them a lot of credit. Dave Jordan, those guys did a fantastic work, and they deserve to be recognized for all the stuff they've done. Gary Lepouk's here. He's done a ton of work on celestial navigation. Liz Smith, we didn't get into the dateline theory stuff, but Liz in here somewhere, she did a lot of good work on that. And so we're building. And that's one of the things I love about the community. Everybody in Purdue and University, her family as well. We've invited them to come back out at some point with us on an expedition. So it's a really good. And I didn't expect that coming into this. I thought this was going to be very closed. Everybody was going to be secretive, but it hasn't been that way at all. Everybody wants to see this thing solved. Everybody wants to see her plane and get close to it and be inspired by her story. And that's I love that.
All we can ask is that as you do more press and interviews, as I'm sure you will do thousands in the future, send everybody to the Hangar Museum so they can see that Lockheed Electra 10E up close and personal, because it really does put it in perspective. I saw both of you just staring at it yesterday when we were out there doing press, looking at it face to face with what you're searching for. That's got to feel special.
Yeah, I mean, at best case scenario, I was only 3 miles away from one of those. So to be actually next to one and get a real close look at all the rivets and the beautiful workmanship on that plane, it's really like a work of art. I really appreciated being next to that thing. So, yeah.
I caught Tony trying to climb inside the cockpit. Just
I know. Gotta watch.
I'm still working Karen over there. That's before I leave. That's nothing more I want is to sit in the cockpit and see what that perspective looking over and then climbing into the hatch and out of the hatch. Yeah. So
we put him in the replica. So
hey, that's close.
It's close. Yeah.
It's close.
All right. How are we doing on time?
All right. We're good.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, once again. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. All right. I'm going to. All right. Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you too, and thanks to Tony and Lloyd. We've had a great time with you this weekend. I encourage you all to stretch your legs, visit for a bit, but please stay here because we have another great program that's coming up next. The Empowered Women Speakers Symposium is coming, and it will feature discussions with this year's Pioneering Achievement Award recipient and SkyWest pilot Camilla Bradley, Atchison Mayor La Rochelle Young, and Amelia Rose Earhart sharing their stories of determination, perseverance, and on their journey as empowered women. And of course, like Amelia said, please visit the Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum to see that Lockheed L-10E up close. It's open today and tomorrow. Thank you all.